Hello everybody. Welcome back to the channel where we talk about stuff. Don't forget to give a like on the video. It's a free and easy way to support the channel. Don't forgive. Remember I told you before, I've mentioned it a couple of times, I think even more so over the course of this year. Things that I first heard when I got into the cryptocurrency market about 78 and a half years ago, somewhere around there. And I was trying to explain that a lot of the stuff that I heard before about what would happen in the future has already begun to happen. It was basically this idea of kind of like a nerd Bitcoin ownership. It would start from like people who were developers, people who were interested in money, people who understood what inflation was, and eventually it would essentially trickle up, if you will, to companies and corporations. Companies announcing that, you can buy socks with Bitcoin. You can buy a keychain with Bitcoin. This like kind of level of adoption. That would then switch to smaller countries, which we've also begun to see, but now it's also like edging into like the actual bigger countries as well. That would then go to larger corporations who would then at some point announce or realize. And once again, the craziest part is that this was all foretold years ago. And I don't know if it's part of the magic trick or if it's simply just kind of like maybe logic that I wasn't able to catch on to as I was just getting into finance. If you know that things are going to inflate and the US dollar is going to be devalued, over the course of time, you can see that it's going to get worse, not better, and therefore you can make these assumptions about where things are going to go. Once you get into the idea of like a corporatized Bitcoin and cryptocurrency market, which is where we currently are, these institutions and stuff like that getting into the space, one of the other things that was foretold about the future of crypto had to do with the actual valuation of the US and the US dollar both as a whole, if you will. Since the United States lost its AAA rating, literally like being like the pristine rating for a country, the US hasn't lost this rating in about 80, 90, almost 100 years. Like it's the US dollar. It's the reserve currency. One of the things that I first heard when I was getting into the cryptocurrency space is that eventually the US dollar would falter. But not in like a slow and steady kind of way. There would be something dramatic that would happen that would kind of like force it like almost into the ground. I know it sounds a bit dramatic, but just stay with me. The thing that we had in 2020, especially the beginning of the year when the Fed printed trillions of dollars, did a lot to devalue the US dollar. And we typically see sometimes, usually, countries will actually print more money as a way to devalue their currency so that it appears cheaper compared to other countries who then go, I want to do business there because their currency is a lot weaker than ours. However, this is something like a completely different monstrosity that's currently taking place. I'm getting a lot of the energy that I got from years ago, hearing about this in 2016, 2017, never really imagining that it would be happening right now. But we're also seeing like the debt levels within the United States reach levels that they should not ever be, or maybe by the time we're in the year like 2060, actually somewhere around there. The loss of the AAA rating and the bills that are being passed within the United States that have to do with like tax breaks. I don't know if you've seen them, if you're aware of them. There was one that was recently passed that basically said there would be tax breaks across the board. If you look at what it's actually doing or who it's actually for, it's going to cause further deficits because the tax breaks only apply to, I think, the first stage is if you make over 340,000. Then the next level is if you make, I think, over 950,000, you're getting additional tax breaks. Everyone making less than 340, their taxes are going to also go up. Not to mention the other bill that's actually, I know it sounds crazy, the other bill is going to add an additional 3 trillion with a T, $3 trillion worth of debt to the US's budget and deficit. The weird shimmering light in all of this has to do with it, and I mentioned it in another video as well. I don't remember, but I mentioned it before. I'm starting to see this narrative like re-jump back into the cryptocurrency space. What narrative, you might ask? Years ago, the idea was from like the original Bitcoiners is that as the US dollar falters, declines, begins to disappear, we would see Bitcoin kind of stepping in as a hedge of some sort. You know, like when you hear like digital gold, Bitcoin's better, that kind of thing. It's that we would begin to see signs of companies and corporations and countries basically announcing that they're also into Bitcoin. Do you remember when the first tariffs were announced in February? If you weren't here for that video, about a week after, we started hearing that a lot of countries and corporations behind the scenes were making plans to get into Bitcoin. Why, you might ask, is because they began to sell off their U.S. stocks, their U.S. equities, any securities that might be tied to America, and also selling off their U.S. dollar treasury notes and dollars as well if you want to. Then you ask, well, where did that money go? If you were here from the end of February, March, April, and subsequently also the beginning of May, we've had a nonstop flow of information and news about sovereign wealth funds who are de-dollarizing and putting billions of dollars into Bitcoin. About corporations, we now have 9, 10, 11, 12. I don't know the exact number, but I think it's near 12 who've come out publicly and said that they're making their own Bitcoin reserves as well as they move away from the US dollar. So we're seeing the literal shift in real time, and this is what I think is the unbelievable part. I told you a lot of times I'll make videos, I'll talk about stuff, and I see in the comment section or on Twitter people either calling me names because they have nothing better to do with themselves or simply being like, no, that's not happening. What's actually taking place is, and I'm like, I'm reading the news. I'm going over the news. I'm looking at the news. I'm getting all facets of the news. And I mean, when I say all facets, it's not just like US news. I'm reading from around the world as to what these countries are doing, what their leaders are saying that they're going to do, and what we're currently seeing processing directly in front of us. We're witnessing the actual demise of the US dollar in real time. I think people aren't used to seeing historical events happen in front of them. So like we may have like 1 or 2 things that we hear in the news or things that happened about 24 years ago, but we're not used to like the idea of this thing that we've used as currency disappearing. That's part of the thing that I go over multiple times when I say like these rich people have already decided it behind the scenes. It's not a tinfoil hat thing. It's just logic. If they run everything in the world and they control everything and they see that the thing that was giving them stability is not giving them stability, they look for something else. This thing is finite. This thing moves around the world. This thing can be held by anyone. It also like kind of lowers capital controls as well if you're just using the blockchain. So of course, all these rich people have flown to Bitcoin. But the general public, and I'll say it this way, people are used to living paycheck to paycheck. People are used to just getting their money from their employer, spending it on their rent and other things that they need, and then going back to square one. The bigger picture doesn't usually hit them or apply to them because they only know the smaller picture. So when we continuously go over news like this all the time, it means something. Like it actually, so the point basically being the news story, I mean, we can even, whatever. Basically, the US dollar is like, it has maybe about a decade left. I don't know if we went over that here, but Mike Novogratz. What's this other guy's name? I can never remember his name. Tim Draper. Yes. And two other people. Oh, also the CEO of BlackRock. I don't know if you caught that one. This was a month and a half ago. They've all said in separate intervals, the US dollar is kind of done. And they've been mentioning that other countries have been de-dollarizing, and this is why they are moving heavier into Bitcoin. And Tim Draper and the guy from BlackRock gave 10 to 15 year time frames that said that basically by the end of the 10 years or the end of the 15 years, that the US dollar would still be around, but it wouldn't look the same. It would. Oh, if you weren't here for that one as well, there was an economist online who said that the best case scenario right now is that the US dollar would eventually look like something, or like the US's economy would look like France. He said it would be a mix between France and Spain. So the person was asking him, they said, well, what's the worst case scenario? And he said it's what they think is kind of coming for the US is that basically their economy would look something between Turkey and Greece. And if you forgot, Turkey has like a 60-70% inflation rate. He says if things continue in this direction, in about 5 years, the US economy will look like Turkey. So yeah, it's fascinating to see this happening. It's a little weird, and it's also interesting to see that we're hearing directly where the wealth transfer is happening. When you see me, like, sometimes in the title I write like the wealth transfer is happening. Everyone pay attention. It's not meant to like be clickbaity. This is the wealth transfer. Normal people think that the wealth transfer has to do with like literal money sloshing from rich people onto them, making them richer. No, it's a literal movement of the entirety of what we know as money and what we know as wealth into a brand new direction. The rich people have absorbed as much Bitcoin. They're still buying more because they know that eventually Bitcoin's going to $1 million plus. So pay attention to everything that's going on. If anyone out there is skeptical, good luck to you. I sincerely hope it works out. But yeah, weird times ahead. I hope you all enjoyed. I hope you all are having a great day, morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are, wherever you might be. I do hope it's absolutely fantastic. Thank you all once again for watching, listening, liking, commenting, and supporting, and I will most certainly be talking to you all soon. See you.